Good morning, everyone. My name is Murali Nadaraja. I manage the joint venture that we have with YTL in Malaysia. Malaysia is in many ways the skunk works for Xchanging. A lot of the emerging technologies is actually experimented and proved in the projects that we run in Malaysia. And what happens then is once it's proven, it's replicated throughout the Xchanging family. To talk a little bit about the technologies, one of the main technologies that we have identified and brought forward is this thing called the service delivery framework, which we call Big Community. What we've done with the Big Community is really created a differentiation for how we deliver SI and bespoke projects. I have a short video here that will actually introduce the idea. So I'm going to actually use three examples of where we've successfully applied this big community model. One of them is our flagship learning platform where we've implemented in Malaysia. We have in that learning platform a community of about 10 million users consisting of parents, teachers, and students, over 10,000 schools. I'll follow up then with another area that where we've applied the big community model successfully in the ticketing platform for the train system that links the international airport in Malaysia with the city center. And finally, round up with how we've applied big community in the Internet of Things, which is a key emerging technology. The big community has three basic themes. Right? The first one is we tend to use a cloud-based approach to everything that we deliver. And why cloud-based? Because it allows us to centralize and share these resources across multiple smaller customers into one large big community, creating economies of scale, but more importantly, creating a differential for us where we have a significant cost advantage or a differential over other systems integrators and bespoke. The second model that we apply is all about crowdsourcing curation. It's about reducing the cost per operation for the customer. And we'll use again these three examples to talk about how we've significantly reduced the operations cost for our customers. And finally, about the rating model where we improve quality through the crowdsourcing model. So the first example, why this is important, and Ken alluded to it in his first slide, about where it positions us vis-a-vis the other players. So traditionally, if you look at the top left-hand corner, this is where the traditional BPO, ITO players have played, which is in complex business processes, but really with low technology enablement. One of the challenges that the traditional BPO, ITO players have is they have been able to handle very complex processes that consist of tens of people or hundreds of people, but unable to replicate the technology base across multiple customers. So you may have a complex financial processing system that you might have implemented for a customer, but when you get the second customer, because of the complexity and the nature of the business, you actually create another financial system to handle the processing for that specific customer. On the bottom right-hand corner, this is a category I call the Model T players. Right? So if you remember Ford in the early 1900s, when he introduced the Model T car, he said you could have any color so long as it was black. Right? So what happens in this model with players like Salesforce and Cloudera, what they really do is they provide highly technology-enabled solutions which are multi-tenanted. So think of a large building, right, with many tenants in it. You come in and you may share the security services. You may have shared washrooms that are available for the offices. In some cases, you might even share the reception. Right? But what happens is you're then constrained by the nature of that services that's available, that's shared among all the various people. So these players are very strong in the technology enablement and the scalability of it, but are unable to handle complex processes. What we have done is actually created a hybrid model, which is the ability to handle complex business processes, right, with high levels of technology enablement, right, allowing us to replicate these processes across multiple customers using a common shared base. The first example I'd like to talk about is the learning platform solution that we've implemented with YTL and the Ministry of Education in Malaysia. Right? What the Ministry of Education in Malaysia wanted to achieve was convert their educational system from the traditional classroom teaching to the new world of information technology-enabled virtual learning. Right? So the traditional classroom in Malaysia consists of about 40 students, and the teacher, because of the model of way the classroom teaching, tends to teach to the middle. So think of 40 students, 20 students are the average, somewhere in the middle of the bell curve, and you teach to them. Now, you have very smart, say, the top 10% of the students, so 10 students, very smart, who are usually very bored. And then on the bottom end of the scale, you actually have a lot of students who are disengaged because they're falling behind in the classes. So the traditional industrial model used to work 200 years ago, but it's less successful in the current world because of this. Now, a lot of people are using technology to shift over to the virtual environment where you actually create a classroom of one, which is the ability to create customized material for each student based on the ability of the student. Our role was really in the implementation and the creation of the managed services to support this environment. So the traditional model would have required a server at each of the schools, and if there are 10,000 schools, there would have been 10,000 servers. What we achieved with the cloud model was actually reduce that to 300 servers centrally located and all the resources shared between the 10,000 schools, creating a significant cost advantage. In addition, we monitor, we manage, and we actually see the performance and the usage at each of these schools. Later in the Internet of Things example, I will actually speak about some of the things that we manage and monitor under the learning platform. The second more exciting achievement that we did was really changing the economics of how these systems are rolled out. So think of a traditional information technology approach to teaching. You would read to create content, and the traditional method is to actually use premium vendors to create this premium content. And this could, for a simple example of a volcano and showing how a volcano explodes and erupts, you would actually have to pay a couple of $1,000s to a vendor to create that material and then play it through the VLE environment. So that's the traditional model. What we've done is actually created what we call the open source or the crowdsourcing curation model. So in this model, what we provide is a large number of channels that contain open free source content. Right? So to take an example, if a teacher wants to create content around a volcano for a geography lesson, would actually go to Discovery Channel or the Science Channel and actually search and locate videos around the usage of volcanoes, right? Then take the volcanoes and put it into the lesson plan, linking it into the lesson plan, and then write the content around that video. Could add one or multiple videos, or even show live examples of Mount St. Helens and so on as examples of this. Now, to test and assess the students' understanding of it, could use the quiz builder to tie it into the volcano and actually ask a series of questions, and also provide the assignment associated with that lesson. Now, the interesting thing about this is the cost of actually doing that is zero. Right? So the traditional model would have been for the Ministry of Education in Malaysia to go to vendors and actually pay them money to develop this content. With this approach, and content in Malaysia represents up to 20% of the Ministry of Education budget. Right? What they have now been able to do is actually use this crowdsourcing, open source approach to actually bring content into the environment and actually have teachers participate in creating this content. Now, what may happen, and what has happened, is a teacher may use a traditional logical academic approach of actually showing how the volcano erupts and how the entire tectonics plates operate. Another teacher might take a gamification approach and use rap songs to actually describe that same method. Right? Another teacher would actually take a game-based approach of actually trying to make the volcano erupt. And all these are different ideas communicating the same concept to the student. Right? Now, other teachers can actually use that base material and create additional content, or students can actually use the content that they're best suited for, that's their learning style. But in all of these cases, with the millions of people utilizing the material, they can rank and rate it, okay? And the best content goes to the top. The value of this approach is really that we have been able to create in the learning industry a new economic model for how to deliver learning to schools. So our traditional competitors in this space have usually been point providers. Right? So if you look at Pearson, they're very strong in content. If you look at other players in this space, they are either device providers, they are content providers, or they provide the learning platform, or they provide connectivity associated with connecting all the schools together. We are a complete end-to-end solution provider. As the systems integrator and the managed services provider, what we do is we bring the platform, the connectivity, the content, and the devices all into a single solution and offer it to the customer. The second important differential is the majority of the solutions out there in the market are proprietary, high-cost solutions. As we described it earlier, with what we've offered with the open source approach, our approach is significantly lower in cost, therefore creating a differential and increased value for the customer. In addition, the project that we've implemented in Malaysia is one of the largest of its kind in the world, with over 10 million users on the system. Right? 10,000 schools, 500,000 teachers, 5.9 million students, and over 4 million parents. So one of the largest of its kind in the world. It actually opens doors for us as we take this idea to other potential prospects throughout the world. So how big is the market? So one of the things you will notice, that is recession-proof. There are really two industries that are really recession-proof. People will spend money, right, for healthcare. Right? Except, of course, if you're using the Obamacare website, right? In which case you have difficulty logging on. Or, alternatively, the other area that you would actually spend a lot of money is education. So these are two areas which a lot of people claim are recession-proof. The market is growing very fast, and our focus is very, very specific. Although a large proportion of the market is in the mature economies, what we have noticed in emerging economies is rather than decisions being made at individual schools, decisions on education and the implementation of information technology across schools are done both at the state or national level. So in the Ministry of Malaysia, they put out a contract for 10,000 schools nationwide. If you look at states in India, right, you will find that in Punjab they have 18,000 schools. If you look at Rajasthan, you find that they have 20-something thousand schools. Each of the states all are dealing with thousands and thousands of schools. So our focus is really on emerging economies, India being a big one, Southeast Asia, and the Caribbean, right, where there is a significant amount of investment being done in learning platforms, but at the state or national level, which is where we play very well. The second example of the three examples that I'm going to talk about is about the ticketing platform. Again, using the big community service delivery framework. What we've done is actually created a cloud services that not only supports the school system, but that same cloud service delivery framework supports all other IT and BPO offerings that we take to the market. So one of them is a ticketing offering that we put in, which is one of the first cloud-based offerings for ticketing in Asia. Right? So instead of having servers in each of the stations, we've centralized it and put it in the data center. Right? In addition, what we found was most rail systems actually operate at a loss. Right? If you take the capital cost of the rail system and you include that in the day-to-day operations, they usually operate at a loss. There are a few exceptions. So most governments tend to separate the rail system capital investment from the operating cost. Even then, many of the rail systems actually operate at a loss. And the primary reason for that is they have a social function, and you make them operate at late evenings, or you make them operate into towns that do not have, enough customers to warrant that usage. So reducing the operating cost for a rail operator is a significant advantage and a differential in any of the offerings that we bring to the market. So what we did is we followed what's done in the airline industry, is basically replacing the ticketing systems and the printed copies with electronic tickets. So we've done the same. So think of the contactless card, your Oyster card, right? An Oyster card generally costs about £1 to purchase. Right? Now the life cycle of the Oyster cards adds another £3 to that £1, which is you need a ticket vending machine, you need some retailers to actually sell it, you also have to have the inventory cost, there's loss, inventory management, all of that associated adds another £3 to the cost of the card. So that's actually a significant investment. In the United Kingdom, what they do is they get you to put a deposit into the card, right? And that deposit is actually recovers some of these, but it also increases the cost of actually using the service. So what we've done is actually done away with that contactless card, as only available as an option, and actually use the phone as the container or the carrier. Right? So this is the cost offloading model that allows us to actually move the cost off from this and actually use the barcode. So this has significantly reduced the cost for the rail system, and we are hoping to replicate this model in a larger way in other rail systems. The third and the most important idea that we've brought to the ticketing platform is again this idea of communities that all the previous speakers have talked about. Traditionally, again, in most commuter systems, what happens is you treat each of the commuters as an anonymous person. You don't really know, just someone tapping on it and walking through and coming out. Right? So there is a lost opportunity to monetize that community or sell value-added services to that community. So what we tend to treat the 6 million commuters that use that rail service between the airport and the city center is really treat them as a community. If it's a regular user, you have the option of offering him better Wi-Fi service and increased bandwidth. Or if you know a person with a specific preference, do location-based marketing and offer it. So what it does is it offers for a customer additional revenue streams by offering value-added services that the customer appreciates simply because we know the customer and where he is in the train at any specific point. So how are we different? All right. So most competitors provide in-station equipment. We provide cloud-based virtual appliances centrally located. That reduces the cost of maintenance. You don't need IT staff at each of the stations. Second, we get rid of the tickets. and we replace them with virtual tickets. And the third and the most important is, instead of anonymous commuters, what we're dealing with is a known monetizable community, right, that provides additional value-added revenue to our customers. Okay. How big is the market opportunity? From a growth rate perspective, the market isn't growing very large. There are about 147 cities with subways and MRT systems, plus nationwide train services. But the market is disaggregating, and more people are upgrading the ticketing systems associated with these train services and moving towards lower cost, higher, more intelligent systems. And we feel we will have significant opportunities pursuing this market. Finally, I'd like to talk a little bit about the Internet of Things and revisit the first case study, which was the Ministry of Education. So the Internet of Things is interesting. It's many different definitions. Some people say it's machine-to-machine communication. Some people talk about it control and management, right? And you see three examples here: smart metering, connected car, and intelligent building. But let me give you some real-world examples of where we've applied this technology in many, many different areas, right? So one example is at the Ministry of Education. So at each of the schools, we provide 3 broadband devices. And basically what a broadband device is this box that sits in the school and provides a Wi-Fi hotspot. But there's really no cable that plugs into the box. What the box does is uses a 4G signal at the back end as the backhaul for bringing and connecting you into the internet. So technically, anywhere you need a Wi-Fi hotspot, you just take that broadband box and move it over and you use it. Right? So teachers found it extremely convenient, and what happened, surprisingly, was these boxes would disappear every Friday evening, okay, and come back every Monday morning, right? And we thought the teachers were very, very diligent, and they were downloading Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, and having these lessons plans being planned and showing these videos, right? To our horror, we found that they were downloading different kinds of movies, right? Transformers and so on. So the Ministry of Education said, that's a problem, right? We want to track, first of all, these are government assets, and really these need to be tracked. And obviously one choice was to actually staple the box to the wall, right? Which defeats the purpose, right? The other problem was really, how do you address a liable issue? So very simple. With the Internet of Things, we can track every single device where it exists. So what happens is when you move it out of the school yard, we throttle the bandwidth down to 0. Right? So when you bring it back home, and we know exactly where it is, because as you drive 50 kilometers to your house, right, and you put it in your house, it's still functioning, the lights are still blinking, but you can't download any data. Right? When you bring it back to the school, we automatically unthrottle it and allow you to start downloading the data. Right? So this way is an example how we manage and monitor systems throughout the schools. We also monitor usage and patterns and so on. Another example is in the intelligent building. Right? So a major problem obviously is, not a problem, but a major cost of buildings is the utility spending on buildings. So what we've done is we've done a couple of proof of concepts with some clients where we've actually taken all the sensor information of whether a person is in the room or not in the room, what is the temperature readings, right? Whether the lift is in use, not in use, and so on, and actually use big data and analytics to actually optimize the usage of energy, looking at reducing the cost of the utility bill for buildings. Right? So that's so part of it would be stopping the escalator when nobody's using it, right? But also, reorganizing or reassigning lifts to different floors based on what we think are potential usage patterns. And of course, reducing the temperature if there's nobody else in the room. The next thing is, of course, the connected car. And in the connected car, we've also done a couple of proof of concepts. And this is really an emerging technology where we are expanding. One of them is obviously usage-based. So we can obviously provide lower insurance rates based on how someone uses the car. Is he speeding? Is he using the brake extensively? And so on. And all of these are part of the capabilities that the Internet of Things applies. So in all our technologies, we are beginning to see Internet of Technologies used extensively, especially in the cloud-based arena. Finally, I would like to summarize what are the key concepts. As I mentioned earlier, right, on the top left-hand corner is where the traditional ITO, BPO players who have the capability of managing complex business processes, but have the difficult task of actually trying to replicate the technology base used to deliver this business processes across many different customers, which have many different types of complex business processes. On the bottom right corner, we have what we call the Model T players, who actually have high technology enablement, multi-tenanted solutions that actually use the same base to support many different customers, but unfortunately are unable, okay, to support complex processes. So these users are not seen in very complex processes. What we have done in the process of transitioning is actually combine the best of both those worlds, right? By actually using the cloud to create a shared service where everything is shared between many, many different customers, creating economies of scale. The second advantage is our model of cost offloading, right? We are looking at every means of actually reducing the cost of operations for a customer. And in the example of the MOE, Ministry of Education, we've cost offloaded using content curation. In the example of ticketing, we've actually reduced the cost by eliminating the contactless card. The third is what we call the million eyeball concept, right? With so many people looking at the content, with so many people using the system, what we find is quality is improved significantly. Right? So with different types of Volcano lesson plans out there, you have people ranking and rating them. And because of that, the best quality gets to the top, and overall, the content quality for the customer has improved. The fourth is creating additional revenue streams. Right? So because we treat all of these as communities, in the Ministry of Education, we have something called the Frog Store, which allows us to put products out there, and add-on peripheral supplementary material is available through that Frog Store and is utilized by the students, and these are paid for by the students who require them or want them. In the ERL example, it's additional products that are offered to the commuters as they travel through the system. Last, in all of these examples, we are generating intellectual property in the framework, the big community service delivery framework, and as we replicate this across new customers in the systems integration and bespoke space, we expect more, what you call it, differentiation and increasing community value, because each additional customer adds to the base below. Thank you for your time and attention.